I woke up in a theatre, and my dead daughter was the opening act. My daughter was dying, and all I could think about was the perfect closing line. For as long as I can remember, the world was just a backdrop for the stories in my head. I wasn't a husband or a father or a factory drone tightening bolts on an assembly line. I was a storyteller, a creator of worlds, trapped in a cheap rental with a mortgage in a family that didn't understand the magnificent screaming thing that lived inside me. My wife, Mirella, used to understand. Or she pretended to. In the beginning, she saw it as a romantic quirk. The tortured artist. She'd bring me coffee in my study, the little room I called the engine room, and kiss the top of my head while I stared, unblinking, at a blank page. But romance doesn't pay for orthodontics. It doesn't fill the fridge. After our son, Alec, was born, followed by our little Paloma, the engine room became a fortress. I'd lock myself away after a 10-hour shift, ignoring the sounds of a family living a life just a few inches of drywall away. The drone of the television, the shatter of a dropped glass, Paloma's laughter. It was all just noise that interrupted the rhythm of my typing. "This is the one, Miri," I'd say, holding up a few stapled pages like a holy text. "This one will get us out." I can feel it. She stopped believing me around year 7. By year 11, she just stopped responding at all. Then Paloma got sick. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic event like in the scripts I wrote. It was a slow creep. A quiet fog that rolled into our house and never left. Bruises that wouldn't fade. A weariness in her 6-year-old bones that no amount of sleep could fix. Leukemia. The word itself felt grey and sterile, an alien term that didn't belong in the same sentence as my daughter's name. The treatments were biblical in their expense. I took a second job, a soul-crushing gig at a call centre, reading from a script for 8 hours a night, selling garbage warranties to lonely people. The irony was a bitter pill I choked on every day. My own words, the ones that were meant to set me free, gathered dust in a drawer while I spouted corporate-approved dialogue for $13 an hour. I began to resent them. I know how monstrous that sounds. I saw my daughter's pale face and didn't just feel love and terror. I felt the anchor of her illness dragging my dreams to the bottom of the ocean. I saw my wife's exhausted eyes and felt the weight of her judgment. They were obstacles. They were the reason I was failing. One afternoon at the factory, I was clearing a jam in a belt press. I looked at my right hand, the one that typed, that held the pen, and I just left it there. A moment of calculated hesitation. The machine whirred, then clamped down. I didn't scream. The sound of my own bones crunching was distant, like someone snapping a bundle of dry twigs. I'd crippled the very tool of my trade for the sake of it. I was fired, of course. The security footage was clear. But the small settlement check and the months of disability felt like a victory. I had what I wanted. Time. Mirella had to take on more shifts. The house grew quiet. Alec, who was 14 now, retreated into his bedroom like a hermit crab pulling into its shell. The only time I heard him was when he was raiding the kitchen late at night. The house became a tomb with 3 ghosts, each haunting their own separate room. I wrote like a man possessed. My hand, now a gnarled thing of pins and scarred flesh, ached with every keystroke, but the pain fueled me. I visited Paloma in the hospital, not just as a father, but as a researcher. I took notes. The precise shade of blue of the veins under her translucent skin. The way her dark, curly hair came away in wisps on the pillowcase. The rasp in her breath. It was all material. Raw, authentic material. Mirella found the script one night. The one I was sure was my masterpiece. A heart-wrenching family drama about a writer struggling to cope with his daughter's terminal illness. She read it, standing in the doorway of the engine room, her face a mask of stone. When she was done, she didn't yell. She just let the pages flutter to the floor. "You're not an artist," she said, her voice hollow. "You're a vulture. You're picking over her bones before she's even gone." She left the next day. packed a single bag and was gone. Paloma died 2 weeks later. The funeral was a smear of black suits and muted crying. I remember Alec didn't cry. He just stood by the tiny casket and stared at me. It wasn't sadness in his eyes. It was a pure, focused hatred that burned hotter than any sun. After that, the house was just the two of us. Two strangers separated by a hallway. The silence was absolute. I drank. Bourbon and the painkillers I'd gotten from my hand. The pills didn't stop the physical pain, but they built a nice, thick wall around the other kind. I used Paloma's death. I wrote a new draft, weaving her last days into a tragic tapestry of loss. I made Morella a cold, abandoning shrew. I made myself the broken, misunderstood hero. I turned my son's silent grief into a subplot about teenage angst. I took every sacred, private piece of our family's agony and twisted it into something for strangers to consume. The silence from Alec's room stretched from 1 day into 2, then 3. The usual muffled sounds of his video games and music vanished. It was a dead quiet. A heavy, stagnant silence. Then came the smell. Faint at first. A sickly, sweet odor seeping from under his door. I knocked. I called his name. Nothing. I threw my shoulder against the door, the wood splintering. He was in his bed. It wasn't violent. It looked like he was sleeping. An empty bottle of my painkillers was on his nightstand next to his laptop. The screen was still on, a single text file open. 6 words glowed in the dark. You finally have your ending. That was it. The wall the pills had built came crashing down. I saw it all. The years of neglect, the monstrous ego, the path of ruin I'd carved through my own family. I saw my son's final damning judgment. I went back to the engine room. I gathered every pill I had left, poured a tall glass of the cheap vodka Marilla had left behind, and sat down at my desk. I was going to write one last thing. I had to. But my fingers wouldn't move. I just stared at the blinking cursor on the screen, a tiny rhythmic heartbeat in the abyss. Then I swallowed everything and waited for the show to end. I woke up in a seat, red velvet, worn and dusty. I was in a grand cavernous theatre, the kind with gilded balconies and a heavy damask curtain. The air was thick with the smell of decay and old popcorn. The seats around me were all empty, except for one. To my left, Morella sat perched on a tall director's chair, a beret on her head and a megaphone in her hand. She wasn't my Morella. This version was a grotesque caricature, her face caked in makeup, a frantic, wild grin plastered on her lips. Quiet on set, she shrieked, a voice echoing through the empty hall. As if on cue, a single spotlight illuminated the stage. And my heart stopped. Paloma walked to the center of the stage. She was healthy. Her cheeks were full and rosy, her hair a cascade of dark curls. She was wearing the little pink tutu from her first ballet recital. She smiled out to the darkness, a perfect, innocent smile. Then she opened her mouth and began to speak. I knew the words. They were mine. It was the opening monologue from my masterpiece, the scene where the dying little girl comforts her tragic father. And as my daughter spoke my selfish, sentimental lies, she began to change. With each word, the color drained from her cheeks. Her skin grew taut over her bones. Her hair thinned and fell away in clumps onto the stage floor. A rattling cough shook her tiny frame, and she sprayed a fine mist of blood onto the floorboards. More feeling. Morella screamed through the megaphone, leaping to her feet. More pathos. I want to see the ribs, darling. Give your father what he wants. Paloma clutched her chest, her voice a desperate rasp, pushing out the last of my pathetic lines before collapsing into a heap of stained hospital linens. The spotlight died. Then another one snapped on, illuminating a different part of the stage. A perfect replica of Alec's bedroom. The door was closed. Action, Morella bellowed. I watched a version of myself, a phantom in my own skin, walk on stage. I watched myself sit at a desk and write, a bottle of bourbon at my elbow. I watched myself ignore the silence from the bedroom for 3 days. I watched myself finally notice the smell, break down the door, and fall to my knees. The phantom on the bed never moved, but the laptop screen glowed, visible even from my seat. You finally have your ending. Then the stage went dark. The silence lasted only a moment before the lights came up again. Paloma was standing center stage, healthy and smiling. The pile of linens was gone. The bedroom set had vanished. Mirella raised her megaphone from the top. This is my hell. Not fire, not pitchforks. Just a front row seat to the premiere of my greatest work. My family performing my sin over and over. The encore is eternity. I wrote this story with their blood and their tears, and now I have to watch it forever. I am so sorry for all of it. I hope, somewhere beyond this cursed stage, you are free. And I hope this punishment, this endless repeating play, is mine, and mine alone.